an Italian Mafia capo named Dwight. The general, Manfredi, had spent the better part of his life serving the New York Inez crime family with unwavering loyalty. When federal heat came crashing down on the organization, Dwight refused to give up a single word about his employer, the Don of the family Pete Inez, or his son Charles Chicky Inez. For that silence, he paid a devastating price: 25 years in a maximum security federal prison in Pennsylvania. Behind those walls, Dwight watched the world move on without him. His wife Marie, unable to carry the weight of his absence, divorced him. His daughter Tina, consumed by the rage of growing up fatherless, cut all contact. The men he had protected thrived while he withered in a cell. Yet Dwight said nothing. He honored the code. He served every last day of his sentence, turning down deal after deal, refusing to betray the family he had chosen over his own blood. As his discharge date finally arrived, Dwight was escorted to the prison gates at age 75. He stepped out into the blinding daylight expecting embraces, celebration, and gratitude. Instead, he found only a driver waiting with a car. Dwight told himself the Inezes must be busy preparing something grand. He climbed in and rode through streets that looked like a foreign country, new roads, new buildings, new faces, a world that had moved 25 years forward while he stood perfectly still. The driver took him to a grand mansion in Long Island and escorted him inside. There were greetings, yes, but they were cold and businesslike. The hierarchy had shifted dramatically in his absence. Pete was aging and frail. Chicky now ran things with his entitled son Vince circling like a vulture. When Dwight reminded them of everything he had sacrificed, of the years he had given them, the room felt uncomfortable. Then Chicky delivered the blow with the bluntness of a man who felt nothing. He wanted Dwight to relocate to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Dwight was hurt to his core. He tried to reason with them, appealing to old times, to brotherhood, to blood. But it was over before it started. They had made their decision. He was being discarded, exiled to a place nobody cared about, handed a suitcase, and shown the door. He walked out of that mansion with his dignity intact, but his heart quietly shattered, telling himself he would survive this betrayal. He always had. Dwight arrived at Tulsa's airport with one suitcase and no plan. A young cab driver named Tyson Mitchell picked him up and drove him into town. During the ride, Dwight peppered the young man with questions about the city that Tyson couldn't always answer, their different worlds and ways of speaking creating an almost comedic language barrier. But Dwight was already studying everything with the sharp eyes of a man who had spent 25 years waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. When he spotted a marijuana dispensary from the road, he told Tyson to stop. Inside, after knocking out the security guard with casual efficiency, Dwight introduced himself to the store's owner, a man named Bodie. He studied the operation with the practiced eye of a businessman, subtly pressed Bodie into showing him the safe, and found $500,000 sitting inside it. Dwight took a few stacks, promised to protect the store from gangs and law enforcement, and walked out as calmly as he had walked in. Outside, he hired Tyson as his personal driver for a generous weekly salary, handed him cash, and ordered him to buy a black Navigator. When the car dealership refused to sell to Tyson because of who he was associated with, Dwight paid the owner, Donnie, a visit personally, and made his point in the only language certain men understand. That evening at a local bar, Dwight met the owner, Mitch, and began building his first real friendship in Tulsa. The city was small and underestimated, exactly what Dwight needed. Within days, he had established a security arrangement with Bodie, convinced him to launder his money instead of keeping it in the store where the federal agents could find it, and brokered a better deal with Bodie's weed supplier, Jimmy. He also had an unexpected one-night stand with an ATF agent named Stacy Beal, a complication that would grow considerably more complicated when Stacy arrived at work the next morning to discover exactly who she had spent the night with. Dwight moved fast. He got a learner's permit through creative means at the DMV, secured a debit card, and used it to track down contact information for Tina. When he finally reached her, a representative told him she didn't want to speak to him. The wound tore open and bled fresh. The confident old man who had been boldly building a criminal empire in a city that didn't know his name suddenly felt helpless against the decisions he had made a lifetime ago. He kept moving. That was the only way he knew how to survive. Trouble found him at the DMV during his driving test when a ranch hand named Armin, who had fled the criminal world 20 years earlier and settled in Tulsa, tried to have him killed out of fear. The attack failed but left Dwight's driving instructor, Paul, traumatized and bleeding. Instead of rushing to the hospital, Dwight used Paul's blood to write down the attacker's partial license plate. The police took him in for questioning. Stacy used her rank to free him. When Dwight tracked Armin down and confronted him, demanding to know who sent him, the answer shocked him to his bones. It was Pete himself who had ordered the hit years ago, fearing Dwight might eventually talk. Armin had simply been the instrument left over from that old order. Dwight, in a moment that revealed the full depth of who he was, looked at Armin's son running out to greet his father and chose not to pull the trigger. He spared Armin's life and hired him instead. Meanwhile, his small crew had grown. Tyson had become indispensable despite Dwight's efforts to push him away for his own good. Bodie was thriving. Mitch had become a genuine friend and partner. Together, they launched a laughing gas operation, selling nitrous oxide at music festivals through Bodie and Tyson. The profits were real and the momentum was building. But the local biker gang, the Black McAdams, led by a dangerous man named Cowan Walrip, didn't appreciate anyone operating on their territory. They ambushed Tyson and Bodie, beat them badly, and stole their inventory. Dwight responded the way he always had. He gathered his men, waited until the timing was perfect, ambushed the gang at their next festival gathering, and took everything back plus interest. When Tyson's father Mark showed up unexpectedly to fight alongside them, it was one of those rare, strange moments where the line between criminal world and real world blurred into something almost beautiful. A father fighting for his son, even while having everything his son had become involved in. The joy was short-lived. Dwight received a call from his sister, Joanne, telling him that his younger brother Joey had terminal cancer. The news unraveled something deep inside him, years of suppressed regret about the family he had missed, the holidays he hadn't attended, the moments that could never be recovered. He called Joey to say goodbye and then cried through the night, mourning losses that had nothing to do with enemies or territory. He traveled to New York for Joey's funeral, where he saw Tina for the first time in nearly 20 years. She refused to speak to him. Joanne filled in the blanks. Tina had gone to college, studied horticulture, built her own business, married a man named Emery, and was raising twins. She had built everything Dwight had dreamed for her without him. At a lunch after the funeral, Dwight met Emery and predictably made it awkward by questioning why he hadn't sought his blessing before marrying Tina. Tina snapped at him and walked out. Later, Dwight visited Pete in the hospital, where Vince tried to provoke him. And then the moment came that changed everything. Tina pulled him aside in her flower shop and, through years of pain and anger, finally told him the truth. That Nico, one of Pete's own men, had come to their home when she was a child and raped her. Dwight didn't process it slowly or rationally. He found Nico playing cards with Chicky and beat him to death with his bare hands in front of all of them. No words, no trial, just the swift, brutal justice of a father who had failed to protect his child and was correcting that failure the only way he knew how. He returned to Tulsa, knowing the Inez family would have to respond. Back in Tulsa, the war with Cowan's biker gang escalated. Carson, Cowan's enforcer, kidnapped Bodie. The dirty cops on Cowan's payroll harassed Mitch at his bar. Stacy, now personally invested in keeping Dwight out of prison, warned him repeatedly to stay low while simultaneously battling her own colleague Doug, who wanted to escalate the federal investigation. When Carson eventually attacked the bar with gunfire, Dwight and Mitch killed him and buried the body in the desert. Cowan, enraged and blinded by grief over Carson's death, strangled his own informant Roxy when she got too close to the truth. The ATF investigation into Cowan deepened. Stacy maneuvered the FBI onto Cowan's financial records, eventually uncovering over $8 million hidden across various accounts. The walls closed in on Cowan. He responded by trying to kill Dwight directly, showing up with his Lieutenant Robbie and opening fire. Stacy threw herself in front of Dwight and took a bullet. She killed Robbie but was rushed into surgery. Dwight sat at that hospital through the night, shaken in a way that went beyond self-interest. He owed her his life. When Cowan regrouped, Dwight had Bodie hack and drain Cowan's entire hidden account, $8 million gone in a keystroke. Then, when Cowan made his final move and attacked the bar with his full crew, Dwight's team responded as a single unit, practiced and precise. They eliminated Cowan's men and Dwight killed Cowan himself. The biker war was over. 3 months later, Tina brought her twins, Cody and Ryan, to Tulsa. They rode horses at Margaret's ranch while Dwight stood back and watched the scene he had dreamed about for 25 years quietly come to life. That evening was the grand opening of the casino, his proudest achievement. He sat beside Tina as Mitch sang on stage, and at the end of the night they had their first father-daughter dance. It was interrupted almost immediately when Stacy appeared outside and arrested Dwight for attempted bribery, citing the $1 million flash drive he had sent her as thanks for saving his life. In jail awaiting trial, Dwight met a man named Harlan who had gambled away $12.5 million in government grant money meant for a wind farm and was now facing prison. Dwight filed the information away. He always did. At his arraignment, he dismissed his public defender, represented himself, and argued successfully enough that the judge set bail at $3 million, which Tina posted without hesitation. The Inez family, watching Dwight build his empire from afar while Goody defected to his side, began to fracture. Chicky eventually made his way to Tulsa. On the surface, he came to make amends. In the background, he was conspiring with Bill Bevella, the boss of the Kansas City mob, to eliminate Dwight once and for all. Dwight had also caught the attention of Cal Thresher, the biggest marijuana supplier in Oklahoma, who controlled local officials and distribution networks with an iron grip. Cal was positioning himself to run for governor. He was also silently partnered with Jackie Ming, a Chinese triad leader who was growing heroin on Cal's land without permission, a secret that would eventually tear everything apart. The conflicts converged at once. Jackie's men attacked Dwight's wind farm operation. Cal tried to edge him out of Margaret's ranch. The Attorney General, Dylan McGrath, colluded with Cal to suppress Dwight's liquor license application. Armin, spiraling from his divorce and financial collapse, accepted money from Cal in exchange for information on Dwight's operations, a betrayal that cost him everything. And through it all, Dwight held his crew together, sat through his bribery trial representing himself, and in one of the most remarkable courtroom performances the city had seen, argued that the money he sent Stacy wasn't a bribe, but an act of genuine gratitude. The jury returned a verdict of not guilty. The final reckoning came from multiple directions at once. Quiet Ray, the boss of bosses in New York, summoned Dwight to a sit-down in Arkansas to demand 80% of his liquor profits. Bill Bevella, regretting the deal he had made, was kidnapped by FBI agent John Musso, who had been running Dwight as an unwilling informant. Jeremiah Dunmeyer, a powerful local businessman, kidnapped Joanne and threatened to burn everything Dwight had built unless he surrendered the distillery. And a professional bomber named Dexter was contracted to kill both Dwight and Jeremiah, planting a device in a hotel where Cal's campaign launch was being held. Dwight handled each threat with the methodical patience of a man who had spent 25 years learning how to wait for the right moment. He got Dexter's confession on tape. He cleared the hotel before the bomb went off. He cornered Jeremiah, freed Joanne, and burned Jeremiah alive the same way Jeremiah had burned Theodore Monteague. He outnegotiated Quiet Ray. He leveraged the Attorney General through an artful casino sting, letting the man gamble himself into debt, and then offering to forgive it in exchange for Joanne's liquor license. He handed Agent Muse the confession tape in exchange for a federal liquor license, turning even that coercion into a transaction he walked away from ahead. At the end of it all, Dwight's crew sat around the casino: Mitch, Bodie, Tyson, Goody, Bigfoot, Grace, Spencer, Joanne, and Margaret. The Monteague bourbon was selling nationally. The wind farm was operational. The weed operation was expanding. The car dealership was thriving. Cowan was dead. The Ineses were finished. Cal was heading toward the governor's mansion. And Dwight was exactly where he had always belonged, at the head of a table, surrounded by people who had chosen him the same way he had chosen them. Russell, the old friend Quiet Ray had sent to kill him and who had instead stood beside him, said his goodbyes and headed home to New Orleans. Mitch took the stage and sang. Dwight sat with Margaret and let the music wash over him. Agent John Muse walked into the casino that night with the liquor license. Dwight accepted it without a word, returned to his table, and raised a glass. He had survived the prison. He had survived the betrayal. He had survived the exile, the biker gang, the mob, the feds, the bombs, and every enemy who had underestimated what a 75-year-old man with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove was truly capable of. They had tried to humiliate him. They had handed him a suitcase and pointed him toward a city nobody cared about. He had turned that city into his kingdom. The general was home.